This is what a Russian cruise missile looks and sounds like. And this is the sound of the Ukrainian army intercepting it. Of the 69 missiles launched at Ukraine today, 54 were shot down, according to the military. Again, an impressive hit rate. Sophisticated Western-supplied anti-missile systems are in operation, and the US are sending a Patriot system. But this morning, the shoulder-launched Igla was the star of social media. Some of the missiles reached their targets, though, like this one, destroying energy infrastructure in Ukraine's second city, Kharkiv. At points today, 90% of the city of Lviv in the west was without power, 40% of Kyiv itself. But Ukrainians are getting used to this, and power is often restored quite quickly. Almost every week now since October, the Russians have filled Ukrainian skies with missiles, and most get shot down. But consider this. One Calibre cruise missile costs the equivalent of £5 million. Plus, if even half of today's attacks were cruise missiles, the Russians just spent at least £200 million this morning, knowing that most wouldn't reach their target. And with Russia running low on stocks of missiles, the question is, what's the point of all of this?
The one thing you can say it is doing for the Russian war effort is it seems to be taking a great deal of Ukrainian resources, from what we can tell, to shoot these things down, and some Ukrainian attention. So it does have at least, while it is, I think, going to fail on its ultimate purposes, it does at least serve Russian interests by diverting the Ukrainians to put more into defense.
Aside from tying up military resources and targeting people's heating and lighting, Moscow's also using these attacks as a political battering ram, an attempt to force Ukraine to the negotiating table. And finally, the missile strikes send a message to a Russian audience.
A great deal of the propaganda is keep fighting, because the Ukrainians are having a horrible time. The Ukrainians are cold, the Ukrainians are miserable, this is what we're doing to them. And so it also seems to be having a Russian domestic political messaging purpose to show that the war is not the fiasco that actually on the surface it seems to be.
Leonid Patkurin is 79. His analysis around Russia's campaign of missile strikes particularly pertinent. His home in Kyiv was destroyed this morning.
Ну, тут у меня нет слов для выражения, как это назвать. Это, как говорится, как война есть война, всякое бывает. Но это не война, это преступление перед человечеством, такое висит.
Every missile, every home destroyed drives another wedge between Ukraine and Russia. To underscore the point, last night the statue of Russian Empress Catherine the Great was removed from a square in Odesa. Will end up in a museum. This would have been unthinkable before the war. Symbols of colonial power for many take on a new potency when your country is being invaded.
Joining me now is Alexei Goncharenko, the Member of Parliament for Odessa. Mr. Goncharenko, thanks very much for joining us. Now, it was a brutal set of strikes. What is the situation across the country?
The situation is difficult. Millions of people are still without electricity, without running water, including my native Odessa, where I am now. Part of the city is already connected, but unfortunately, biggest part of the city still not. So that is a difficult situation.
I mean, as we saw in the earlier report, the military managed to intercept many of these missile strikes. But as you say, there's still significant damage done to infrastructure, to power stations. How are the people managing with that situation?
Yeah, again, Russia attacked power grid, energy infrastructure, water supply infrastructure. So this is a terror tactics. This is like they're acting as a terrorist, because from a military point of view, it's nothing. It's like, you know, in 1940, on December 29, was the biggest bombing by Nazi of London. And now Putin is acting as a Hitler of 21st century, doing absolutely the same. People, certainly it's very difficult for people to live in such conditions, but unfortunately we already got used to this. So it was not the first attack like this. And unfortunately, I think it's not the last one.
No, but how are people practically getting through this? As you say, the Ukrainian people have become used to this situation. In some areas, power comes back on pretty quickly. But this brutal winter weather in some parts of the country, how are people practically managing?
People are collecting water, people are using power banks, people are just doing a maximum they can to be prepared for this situation. People try in the evening not to go out. It's good that now in Odessa it's +7, so it's not so cold how it could be. So that's how people are got used. That's what people are trying to do. If there is no heating in some parts, in some buildings, people are coming to their relatives or friends and stay at them for these days. So everybody is looking for their own way out of the situation.
And how long do you think the people can survive these conditions?
We will survive as long as it will be needed till our victory, because we don't have any other option. This is existential for us. If Russia will win the war, that will mean that we will have problems not with electricity. They will just kill millions, like it was already done by them 100 years ago and before. So we know for what we are fighting. We understand clearly. So we will stand so long how it will be needed.
And very, very briefly, if you would, people of your own city of Odessa have taken down a monument of the Russian Empress, Catherine the Great. Why, in the midst of everything that is happening, is something like this important?
Yes, it is important because this is a symbol. Russia used such symbols to say this is a part of Russian Empire. This is not. Odessa is the capital of the south of Ukraine. And yes, that was an absolutely right decision to take out such symbols. There are places in museums, not in the central squares of our cities.
Alexei Goncharenko, thanks very much for joining us, and a little appearance from your little one there too.